Welcome to the Sustainable Supply Chain Forum, a podcast of World Vision. I'm your host, Russ Shoemaker, and today I'm beyond happy to introduce our guest, Rich Bulger. Rich is an award-winning reverse logistics pioneer. He's the founder and CEO of All Things Circular, host of the All Things Circular podcast. He's been chief circularity officer. He's an author of Going Circular, and I have your book here, but I don't know where
I
to
got
put
one.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I read your book. It's fantastic. The list of things you've done is so long. I will mention you were head of logistics at Cisco and Verizon, where you launched Verizon's first retail trade-in program that ended up generating over 1.6 billion annually and outperformed Verizon's accessory sales. I think that story is just highly inspirational. Also, you were a U.S. Army veteran, and am I remembering correctly? Were you at Fort Campbell?
I was in the 101st Airborne.
Yeah, so my wife well, she was a military psychologist, so she was at Fort Campbell. So we lived in Clarksville for a few years, so very familiar.
My side of the world, Hopkinsville, Kentucky, Nashville, Tennessee. There's not a better
Yep.
place on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, so thanks for joining us. I we first met a few years ago at the Reverse Logistics uh Association conference, and that's where I think you handed out your book to everyone who attended, and I saw you speak, and um I read it, and I've been wanting to connect ever since. So it's been a couple of years, but I kind of followed along, and really grateful that you joined in, and looking forward to this conversation.
You're too kind, Russ. Thanks for the invitation.
So, before we kind of get tactical and jump into things, I'm just curious, what's one shift that you've been watching most closely in reverse and circular logistics going into 2026?
I tell you, I'm going to actually lean on the title of the book, The Evolution of Reverse Logistics into a Competitive Weapon. What I'm seeing right now is where reverse logistics were typically an afterthought for companies. We'll figure things out later on. Let's get to market. And when returns happen, we'll just deal with them after the fact. The volume and the monetary impact of unwanted returns. U.S. retail economy will see some new numbers at the NRF Rev Summit in January. But what they shared last year was the retail economy in the U.S. was a $5.2 trillion economy. Unwanted returns, as I call it, contra revenue, took away $860 billion of that value.
Wow.
And that was up from over 300 billion in change prior to COVID.
Wow.
While the impact of the secondary market is also trending north of $800 billion in the US and growing, where technology is making it much easier to match used supply with used demand. And Gen Z millennials
Hmm.
are much more adept at using the technology to find things, and they're much more willing to go through and buy something used. It's not a stigma. It's actually a sense of pride and
Yeah.
making a good decision. So companies are now starting to invest in programs, in updating return policies, investing in talent to go through and solve some of these challenges. It's roughly 30%, $1.7 trillion of a $5.2 trillion economy flows to reverse, and only one college on the planet that I've found has a master's degree or a bachelor's degree program in it, and it's very complex.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did my MBA, and reverse logistics, from what I recall, was not part of it. Like I really first became aware by going to the Reverse Logistics Association, and then reading your book, which opened my mind to a lot of things. And now I do see that there's more podcasts out there and people talking about it. But um, do you think that as you encounter executives and business leaders, like is circular logistics something that people understand?
So I started using the concept of circular logistics because forward and reverse just kind of made people's eyes glaze over. Sounds boring,
Yeah.
complex. I really don't want to have to deal with it, but taking advantage of motivations and I'm a salesperson. I got into this as a marketing director, trying to put money in people's pockets to help sell more new things.
Hmm.
Half my life I spent on commission sales. That's why I started the trading program, was to help sell more new things.
Hmm.
And I got pulled into this space. So I say I'm a salesperson trapped in the body of a reverse logistician, but I've had to make people want to care about the impact of unwanted returns.
Hmm.
And I've had to make them want to care about taking things back and finding who the second, third, and fourth customer is. So I found that using the term circular logistics and defining it as the combination of forward logistics moving to the point of use. Your shirt will never be more forward than it is on your body right now. Through reverse, if you ever decide to trade it in, and apparel trade in, product as a service
Mm-hmm.
is a growing industry moving away from the point of use to get assessed cosmetic and functional capability to go back into forward as it goes to its next point of use is in essence what circular logistics is. What I find is there's a lot of people that care about it, but within large complex ecosystems, you've got to say the right thing to the right people at the right time to orchestrate them caring enough about it to make a material difference.
Yeah. Uh, so how do you explain it to a CFO?
Good question. In fact, right behind me on my desk, there's a picture of a guy. He's wearing a tuxedo,
Uh-huh.
um, looking all dapper. He was actually holding a beer behind his back. He was at a winter circle. He was my associate director of finance when I was the director of marketing. So you had marketing, which is risk, finance, which is risk management, and there's a natural tension between the two. When I started Verizon's trade-in program, he was like, Rich, why would you ever want to do that? We're a cell phone company, spelled SELL, not a buy phone company.
Yeah.
So you should focus on selling accessories, not this crazy buyback. So what I love about, I called him Mr. No at the time. I promoted him to Dr. No because he told me no so much. We disagreed, but it was never disrespectful.
Yeah.
I've got souvenirs of my major mistakes I've made in front of him. But what I love about Dr. No is he forced me to be able to tell a story with numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to do that. And sometimes with finance, it makes people uncomfortable because how do you assign a number to a concept or a forecast? But you've
Mm-hmm.
got to be able to go through and put those proof of concepts. There's a concept that Dr. Peter Evans and I talk about in our master classes called the circularity delta. If you buy your shirt for $100,
Mm-hmm.
over 70% of Gen Z millennials are checking the resale value of their clothing before they buy it because they want to know what the residual value could be for that clothing when
Mm-hmm.
they choose to upgrade it. So they're not buying a thing to be discarded, they're buying an asset. So I had to start teaching finance, and I call it circular finance now. Um,
Awesome.
Circularity delta. Look at the $100 you spent and think how much is that worth and how can you get it back?
Mm-hmm.
If you can get back 10%, how can you get back 20%?
Mm-hmm.
How can you go through and harness that residual value to help you sell more new things, which is something that a lot of point of sale systems don't do. They're designed to sell things out, not buy things
Right.
back. So I had to learn and get really good at business cases. In fact, I was just speaking with a vice president of sustainability on a project, and the concept came up of we have to make the financial case positive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cool. Let's define how you're looking at finance. What is your accounting methodology? Are you
Mm-hmm.
writing things all the way down? Are you holding on to residual value or just
Mm-hmm.
depreciating over time? That's hard to think about. What is your budget in relation to other budgets and departments? You know, a sustainability lead might have an IT budget, but the transportation budget and the operations budget or the revenue that comes from buying something back could go to different places.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found working in large companies doing advisory work, and just as I transitioned from Verizon, a distributor of things, to Cisco, a maker of things, to the CEO of my own company, where I was buying and selling used things in the secondary market,
Yep.
everyone's finances are structured different.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very astute question of how do you talk to a CFO?
Yeah.
That's an illustration, but I would say that talking to sales is a different conversation. Talking to
Mm-hmm.
logistics is a different conversation. They all have different things that they
Yeah.
care about. So you have to become all things to all people, especially in reverse, because you're at the end of a complex ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And if something breaks, you're always the one holding the hot potato. So
Right.
you got to understand everything.
Yeah. So if I would imagine this, this conversation would come from multiple places in an organization. It's, could be someone at a manager director level who learns about circularity, is passionate about sustainability. It could come from a sustainability team. It could come from a CFO or CEO who's passionate about this. And the conversation is going to look different depending on where it starts. But a key is probably going to be finding a champion, someone who has the buy-in, who can have your back if you're not the one in charge, as you try to, so you're trying to convince somebody above you, managing up, to say, I think there's value in this. There's resources, building a case study, but getting that champion to then stand behind you as you do this. Um, what would a test program be? Is it kind of something that you would work with a company and say, let's run a pilot? And how would you kind of design a pilot for somebody interested in starting a circular program?
So one of the people who was important to my journey, lady named Wei Ching Lin, I call her the godmother of the trade-in program because she was the project manager at Verizon who initially was approached with this concept of a trade-in
Hmm.
program. At Verizon, there were 4 areas at the time. I was in one, and I had built a reputation at that point of being a creative, out of the box thinker, someone
Hmm.
who could use their mind to figure out how you can instead of why you can't.
Hmm.
So I was actually brought on to this call where a different area was pitched the concept of trades.
Okay.
And it was everyone that you just mentioned in the company: finance, compliance, operations, marketing, sales, HR. And she went through this presentation saying this is what she wanted to do. I'm going to age myself a little bit, Russ. Have you ever heard of the movie Monty Python and the Knights of the Holy Grail?
Oh, of course.
All right, you remember the knights who say "nee,
Yeah.
nee,
Yeah.
nee." I call that call the conclave of the knights who say no,
Yeah.
because everyone on that call, and once one person said no, everyone
Yep.
started saying no. Can we buy back phones? No. Can we give customers credit? No. Can we send them to a place instead of the centralized center that we're sending
Hmm.
everything to?
Yep.
No. And it was a 45-minute call where Wei Ching just got pulverized by all these people coming up with concepts and justifying their value by finding ways that you should not do something
Yeah.
instead of using their head to say why they should. We talked about the Army. I say I'm an Army truck driver, barely graduated high school, got my degrees from online colleges, so I've never claimed to be the smartest person. But I called Wei Ching. I remember exactly where I was. I was on a pier in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I called her. I'm like, how did that call go? And she's like, not good, not good. I said, all right, let me just make sure that I understand this. You have a company that wants to buy devices, but they're not involved in the transaction. You're more likely to sell your house when you're buying a new house. You're more likely to sell your car when you're buying a new car. Makes sense. You're more likely to sell your phone when you're buying a new phone.
Hmm.
But this company wasn't over the people who were asking the question, would you like to upgrade your phone today? And motivating the follow up question, what are you going to do with your old one? So let me make sure that I understand this. If I give that person $100 for their old thing, this company wants to let us go through and apply that value to their next purchase. Yes, cool. And if I go through and I take that thing and I send it to the right place, they're going to pay me more than $100 to get it
Hmm.
there.
Right.
Yes. I'm like, all right, new source of revenue is going to help me sell more things, and it's probably going to make customers happy because we're adding value. I will be that champion for you. I was the youngest director in Verizon at the time, and I had a great boss who really had my back.
Yeah.
Regional President Jerry Fontaine, the most courageous leader I've ever met. And I said, I'll help you if you promise me one thing. You will never have a call like that again with everyone. Let's go through, get them one at a time,
Hmm.
hear them out, let them say no,
Hmm.
and solve the problems. And they'll run out of reasons to tell us no. And then I
Hmm.
had to go through and apply math. I had to go through and build programs. I had to build safeguards and checks and balances. But once I went through and I started with my easiest yes, and funny enough, it was Dr. No that was my easiest yes,
Okay.
because we worked right across from each other. Even though we disagreed, it was never disrespectful. We built good things together.
Yeah.
Funny enough, when I grew the revenues at Verizon from a billion to $1.6 billion, I brought in Dr. No to run the sales team to do that. So the finance person became the salesperson, and I say he went
Okay.
from Dr. No to Dr. Go. So, but I had to go through, identify the challenge, identify the players, create compelling messages, and gain stakeholdering and alignment. And people thought it happened overnight. It took 2 years.
That was going to be my next question, is how long that took. Yep. And is that Would you call that a typical timeline for a large company? I mean, that's not
Oh,
too bad actually
oh,
for a large organization. 2 years is maybe on the shorter end for a new program like this.
yeah, you would think, and I'm involved right now in a lot of complex things. What I've learned about reverse logistics is there's a Venn diagram,
Hmm.
similarities, differences. There's more similarities and differences in reverse logistics when you go from industry to industry. You go from mobility to laptop computing to automotive
Hmm.
to apparel to a
Hmm.
musical instrument. Everything has a cost to reuse. Everything has a blended benefit.
Hmm.
Everything has a price that you can get and a velocity of how fast you can get it.
Hmm.
So when I went from Verizon to Cisco, and I did that intentionally when I had a chance to retire from Verizon, I wanted to see if what I learned was transferable to a different industry. So the highest paying offer I had wasn't Cisco.
Hmm.
My highest paying offers were staying in mobility, but I wanted to learn international reverse logistics. So I got to run plants in the Netherlands, Hong Kong, Japan.
Cool.
I wanted to see if what I knew could work in a different category set.
Hmm.
Routers and switches and um, telepresence machines, they have a different look, feel, packaging requirement. Um, but they have a cost to reuse. They have a blended benefit. You have to see, does it work and how does it function,
Hmm.
and match use supply with use demand through a lot of the similar channels.
Yep.
So when I went to Cisco, I heard, Rich, this isn't mobile phones. It doesn't work. I'm like, cool. Tell me what you know about mobile phones, and tell me what you know about reverse logistics.
Yeah.
And no one could tell me anything about mobile phones and reverse logistics, but they had in their head it was
Yeah.
just different. Um,
Yeah.
Apparel is the same thing. Um, retail sporting goods. There's a company in the UK, Decathlon, that has a trade-in program for badminton racks and kayaks and
Okay.
other things, and they leverage the customer wanting to upgrade
Yep.
to bring in their old thing to help sell them more new things.
Hmm.
So the concept is much, much, much more applicable
Yeah.
across industries than a lot of people think.
Yeah. Did they bring you in to build that program, or did they bring you in knowing that you could do it, but wanting you to do something else?
They did. So Cisco actually was really one of the only external companies that ever came and visited our center at Verizon, because
Interesting.
Verizon was very defensive. We
Sure.
felt as though our reverse logistics was a secret,
Yeah.
and the leadership that I had wasn't willing to go through and share. But Cisco came in when Verizon won a Gartner Supply Chain Award, and we went through and we um, walked them through the operation. We did some presentations, and then we had a new CEO that joined Verizon about 4 months later. And he took a look
Okay.
at the balance sheet and said, "We're paying too many people too much. So if you weren't on commission, didn't matter your performance rating. I was a leading employee
Oh
my
wow.
entire career.
Hmm.
I went to work one day and there was a retirement option. I could sell my career for this amount."
Okay.
And I looked at him like, man, that pays off my house and puts both my kids through college.
Yeah.
So even though I love my team, I love my mission, I loved the person I work for, I couldn't afford to say, I couldn't look my wife in the eye and say I was being a good steward of my family
Right.
if I said no. And then I get a call from Cisco saying, hey, we wouldn't want to poach you from Verizon, but if you're ever interested in leaving, we'd love to have you. And Verizon, they just laid off 13,000 people. They
Yep.
laid off a lot of really good supply chain folks in the process, but they advertised it. So when I spoke with Jack Allen, I'm like, hey, did you see the news article? He's like, no, we just wanted to wait a polite amount of time before we tried to poach you and bring you in, because were trying to go through and grow into the business. But a
Yep.
brand, Cisco, has different care abouts than Verizon, a distributor of things, Apple,
Hmm.
Samsung, Motorola, hundreds of different accessories, versus a brand who is making and selling one thing.
Hmm.
Brands have much more rigorous fears about the secondary market than distributors do.
Right.
And what I found is when you make, distribute, and sell, the forward process, everyone's aligned and happy when you go through and you're selling something new. Um, Great shirt, marketed, advertised. The
Right.
brand sells it to the distributor sells it to the brand. Everyone's advertising. There's commission spiffs, and everyone's happy. But if you decide that you don't want your shirt as a customer, and you go back to the distributor, or the retailer, they're going to say, well, I've got my rules. You got
Yeah.
30 days.
Yep.
You have to fill out this form.
Hmm.
They really try to go through and limit your ability to return without making you mad.
Right.
And then when your distributor has it and they're trying to send it back to the manufacturer, there's the same things. Well, you can only have
Hmm.
3%, 5%. All these contracts with all these different places are completely different
Yep.
and tough to manage when you have a complex SKU ratio. But if you're the customer, you're trying to close your own circularity delta by getting as much as you can.
Right.
And if the person that you're selling it to says no, and your product has value, technology has made it much easier to go through and find someone that will give you something for it if your distributor or your brand
Hmm.
says no.
Right.
But what I found when I started the trade-in program, because I had people that I sold all kinds of phones to, and when I started trying to buy them back, the brands tried to get me fired. I remember getting summoned to headquarters twice
Interesting.
because they felt as though the activity I was doing, taking phones back and selling them to someone else, was cannibalizing their new
Hmm.
sales.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
what in reality happened was I was enabling their new sales. I just traded in my iPhone 14 and got the iPhone 17.
Yep.
A person wanting to buy the iPhone 17 is not the one that would want to buy the 14, but
Right.
the value of my 14 was able to be used as a trade-in to help
Or a
me.
much more expensive device that I may not have been able to afford.
Exactly right.
Yep.
So brands, in my opinion, right now, to this day, are the most, I'll use a provocative word, stubborn
Hmm.
when it comes to their product, because the marketers, because circular marketing is different. They're
Hmm.
really good at knowing that you want that shirt, where you're going to go, where you're going to get it if they're selling it new.
Right.
But most brands have no idea who the second, third, and fourth customer is, where
Hmm.
they are, and what motivates them to purchase. I think that's the new frontier in sales and marketing, is how do you make more money, not by selling more new things. You
Right.
can do that. That's cool. But how can you also make more money by selling and maximizing the value of things that you've already made?
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned contracts with manufacturers, distributors. So did you, as part of this, did you have to go back and renegotiate those contracts?
Um, at times I did, or I had to build contracts with
Okay.
different folks.
Yeah.
When I took over the monetization team, the trading program had just broke $1 billion in revenue,
Hmm. Wow.
um, from the sale of things that people no longer wanted.
Hmm.
And the leader who brought me into supply chain said, all right, Rich, I was running the operations at the time, $300 million P&L, running 15 million products through, fixing, giving credit.
Yep.
She's like, cool, you did good at that. Thank you for your hard work. Now, what I need you to do is take over the trading program and grow revenues by 300 million in 12 months. Let me know how you're going to do it. And there's three ways that you do it. You get more product, you
Hmm.
process more efficiently, or you generate more value.
Hmm.
So one of the things I did is I went after more supply. We had over 4,000 franchise agent locations that were trading into someone else who was buying phones and then selling them against us in the open market.
Right.
I'm
Yep.
like, well, let's figure out how to get them to choose us to sell them to. And that's when I learned that there's a competition for used things that
Yeah.
most companies aren't aware of.
Yeah.
Um, and then I put Verizon on eBay, Amazon, Sears.com, Walmart.com under Verizon's name and under two
Yep.
sub brands to try to go through and make what I could and as much
Yeah.
as I could, and have outflows. But I had to build contracts for those. I had to also go through and renegotiate contracts that I had with some suppliers that required us to go through and destroy things, which is
Yeah.
a huge waste. And we had the
Yep.
buying power of, well, we're cutting you a check for 100 things and you're barking at us over two
Yeah.
that could come back. And if I do it right, I can help you sell more things.
Right.
So I had to learn how to handle all of these things. And the culmination of the book and the experiences that I have are going to a lot of places and running into brick walls and trying to go through and create compelling stories to get the knights who say no in to give me the time of day.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So, okay, if somebody wants to pilot a program, how would you recommend that they like test this, set it up fast? They've got enough buy-in to say we're going to pilot something. what's the starting point?
So in reverse, there's multiple different avenues. So it really depends upon what you want to pilot. But you've said a couple things during this podcast that I always look for. And the magic words, in my opinion, are, well, that makes sense. I want to try this. Here's what I think is
Mm-hmm.
going to happen. Does that make sense? Um, a recent example was a manufacturer that was making things, and their warranty, they were sending people new product when someone had a warranty claim.
Yep.
Like, well, a lot of companies use a certified like new,
Mm-hmm.
where they'll take something, repair it, and use that. As long as it looks and feels the way the customer expects, and as long as you
Yep.
clarify what the expectation is, used parts, certified pre-owned parts are very common. So we did the math. Here's how many things you have. Here's your repair rate. Here is how much you're spending in new parts to go through and provide a warranty under this
Yep.
umbrella. And here's how much you will save if you just go through and refurbish the stuff that you have that's been bought, used for 3 days,
Yep.
and returned when someone's 7, 8, 9, 10 months into their warranty. Um, here's the economics.
Yep.
And I always like to start with the economics. What I found is, working in the circular economy, I would love to say that environment is king and doing for the planet is king. I'll tell you, I care a lot more about it now
Yep.
than I did when I started this in 2010, because I
Yeah.
didn't know enough. But if you're faced with the economic decision, one's bad for the environment, one's good for the environment, but the cost is the same.
Yep.
Most people choose the one that's good for the environment.
Yep.
But if there's an economic offset, now you've got to go through and be able to talk through that to get to that makes sense.
Yeah.
And what I always tried to do was start with, well, what is the macroeconomics, not the reasons why you can't. Um, should you or should you not go through and trial whatever the pilot program is? Selling on key e-commerce under your own brand, selling underneath a different brand, using returned product for your warranty replacement, creating a buyback program that's monetized, changing your accounting methodology. Here is what the financial impact of your decision is going to be. And once you get the yes of should you or should you not,
Mm-hmm.
then you get to, well, how can you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And in that, how can you, if it gets to the point where the cost is too much, well, then cool. But I find a lot of people, the knights who say no mentality, why you can't when you're presented with an idea always trumps whether you should or should not. And I'd like to lead people to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
then break them off, hear them out, because they tend to be grounded in reality.
Yeah.
They'll say some things that make sense too, and solve those problems, and then take your allies to a broader audience, to stakeholders. Typically how I've been able to go through and get some of these projects and turn them into programs.
Yeah. It's the art of persuasion. Yeah.
Salesperson in the body of a reverse logistician.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So when I was reading your book,
Did it put you to sleep?
it was on my nightstand. Not even joking. You know, if I had a few minutes to read before bed while my wife was getting ready, I would read it. So not that it put me to sleep, but that's just where it was. Um, well, let me back up a step. So I don't know, how much you know about World Vision. We're a global humanitarian organization, but my side of the business is we work with companies of all sizes, ranging Costco down to small family-owned businesses. And most of what we do is we're taking excess inventory, and we're a disposition solution. So we'll take, when there's a natural disaster, we're still like we responded to the Hurricane Helene with clean water, blankets, generators, and we're still there. Now we're rebuilding houses. So we kind of do a lot of disaster relief. We do poverty mitigation, and a lot of that is through product from companies. We'll do around 300 million this year in donated product and excess inventory. And so when I think about reverse logistics, as I was reading your book, I was like, oh, where's donation in all these charts? And I actually have an article kind coming out in NRF, where because I looked online and I could not find any reverse logistics circularity charts that included donation. So I spent the last couple of weeks like making my own chart. It'll be in an NRF article coming up. Um, but yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on product donations. And I know on the one hand, one of the things that we are extremely careful about is dumping, right? Because there is absolutely a problem where people donate and it just ends up in a landfill or worse, somewhere in Africa on a beach floating around in the ocean. And so it goes without saying that is not good, right? That is a bad solution. Where what we do and other NGOs like us, um, we have a much stronger supply chain and kind of end-to-end visibility where we're saying, okay, we're going to go out, we have people on the ground, we're matching supply with demand, we're distributing at a individual or family level, so there's no pallets or containers ending up in a dump. It's not being resold. It's we have those protections in place. We have brand policies in place. We have do not sell and all those things. So, but yeah, I'd be curious your thoughts about how would you integrate product donation into reverse logistics. Like our approach is we come to companies as a business solution. You have excess inventory, we can pick it up within 1 to 3 days and we can take it wherever it needs to go and whatnot. But would love to get your thoughts on that.
So there's two conversation tracks that I think you just went over. One is value that can be generated from returns. And then the second one that I don't want us to lose sight of that we should come back to is what happens to donations really, because they don't often end up in the place and being used the way that some people think that they should. So I'll kind of hit those in two different parts. But in reverse logistics, you have three main parts of your reverse logistics operation. How do you get product? How do you process it? How do you generate value for it? And if you have a product and you're not sending it to someone else, you're trying to find a way to go through and say, how do you find a home for it at the lowest cost and get the most value for it? So everyone kind of has their own variant of what I call the product lifecycle loop.
Yep.
Make, distribute, sell, asset recovery operations, value generation. But you're right. In the book that I have a chart. I do a level 1 process flow where I say, here are all the reasons why things can come back. Some are bad, some are good. Yep. You buy a shirt and you return it. Let's a bad return. You want to try to drive those down because giving people money back is no fun.
Yep.
Or warranty, you buy something and it doesn't work. You want to build better things. So how do you go through and fix those? Those are bad returns. You want to drive them down. An upgrade program, turning into 14 to get to 17 is cool. You win twice. You sell more things and you get something that you bought low that you could sell high. Really cool way to do that, drive those up. Then operations, how do you go through and assess it? Companies are all over the map when it comes to their culture and capabilities of processing and return. Some are really good, some are really bad. Some have talent, some have developed talent, some have shadowed people that were good. Some are just trying to go through and figure it out. Some realize, well, I know I need to do it, but I'll figure it out later on because I'm not at that stage yet.
Right.
And then how do you generate value for things? Can you reuse it as new? Can you use it as a warranty replacement? Can you sell it as a certified pre-owned underneath your own brand? Can you sell it as certified pre-owned underneath an alternate brand? Can you sell it wholesale? Can you scrap or harvest, or can you donate the product? So every value generation outlet, there's an expectation of what can I get that will compel me to bring it here? Mm-hmm. You mentioned goodwill, a donation, charity.
Yep.
Well, I call that a tier 1 reverse supply chain operation. Tier 1 is the first place that someone brings a return to. If I buy a computer on Amazon, I send it back to Amazon. Amazon is the tier 1, first place. Okay. If Verizon buys my phone back for their trade-in program, they're the tier 1. If it goes to EcoATM, a phone kiosk, EcoATM is the tier 1. The first place it gets the thing is a tier 1. They typically have the lowest acquisition cost.
Yep.
And the value exists between the tier 1 and whoever is using it. The next owner of it will typically pay the most. And the value of a donation, and I do need to explore it more. We're working on the second version of the book. And donations are going to be a part of the value generation because they should, but the accounting methodology of how do you account for the donation
right.
is widely different across multiple different organizations.
Yep.
It's not like a car where there's a Kelly Blue Book out there, and the Kelly Blue Book was changed, started
Right.
in 1918 by a used car salesperson, Leslie Kelly, who started buying and selling beat up Model Ts, fixing them and selling them for what they were worth. And eventually he bought and sold enough Model Ts. By 1918, he went and opened up his own used car dealership in California. Then people started coming to him and saying, "Hey, here you have a book of prices that you can buy and sell cars for. Will you mind selling me your blue book?"
Hmm.
That's where the Kelly Blue Book came from. By 1926, the government got wind of the Kelly Blue Book, and they said, "You know what we could do? We could use that blue book to assess property taxes and assign
Interesting.
value." So when you go through and you're donating a car, for instance, my father passed away, and he had a car, was lower value, so we wound up donating it. What compelled us
Yep.
to donate it was there was a tax deduction that we were able to get
Yep.
that was fortified with IRS
Yep.
restrictions, and it was also easy to pick up.
Yep.
Call Cars for Kids; they'll come get it,
Yep.
and you get the tax deduction. So it was cheaper for me to do that
Yep.
than spend the time to go through and try to save value on a car that really didn't have much residual value. But
Yep.
what compelled me to do it was the feel good about the donation,
Hmm.
combined with the ease of use to
Yep.
go through and get something. Whenever you're picking up something for free, there's an old adage in sales: if you're not paying for the product, you are the
Right.
product. So there's value that's associated with different ways, but donations as a value generation outlet is a brainer to go through and figure out. And are you donating it to the right place where you can take a write
Yep.
off? How
Yep.
much should you write
Yep.
off? Because there's not a Kelly Blue Book for everything right now.
Right.
So
Yep.
it's a little bit of guesswork. Even
Yeah.
Goodwill's like, well, you write down what you think it's worth,
Oh yeah. That
and
that's
then
crazy to me, right?
you
And then
you defend it to the IRS, and
yeah. Yeah. That's always they just hand you a little slip like fill this out.
there you go.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. And so we definitely find that with our partners. In fact, I built a product donation calculator on our website that you put in your costs, you put in your tax, you put in your transportation costs, and it essentially will it pops out a result. And it just compares the value. Obviously, with donation, it's the tax write-off
Right.
between product donation and liquidation and disposal. Um, but it's yeah,
Well,
it's there's
there's actually a variant to the donation
mhm.
field as well. So if you donate something that has value, we ran a program at Verizon, the Hope Line, Women's Hope Line, Battered Women's Shelter, and people would donate their used phones to it.
Yep.
Not every used phone was in the capability to go through
Right.
and go to a women's shelter. Might have been
Yep.
too old, or there might not have been
Yep.
enough to go through and really acquire the chargers and the boxes and the
Yeah.
repair parts to fix. But when we were able to go through and sell those devices, we were able to take the revenue that was associated from that sale and apply that to the Better Women Shelter.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, we were able to go through and acquire some devices in mass and use that revenue to go through and acquire those to provide the communication sources. So it was finding a way to win
Right.
that was economical and scalable,
Yep.
but it was a variant of people just donating and the thing goes to the next person. The value of the
Yep.
thing went to
Yeah.
the next person.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. It's, it's not just like donate your trash,
Right.
right? It actually has to be, quality, usable resources. And we've also found it's the internal champion that drives the program. It's just like with reverse logistics as a whole or circular logistics is you have to have the champion who understands where the value lies and can say, yeah, we're going to have a buyback program. We're going to have, here's how we're capturing this value. There's a subset where it makes sense to donate. There's a subset where we send to recycling, and it's you have to have that awareness of the options and of the financial measures behind that, as well as if you have strategic goals around sustainability and all of that.
Well, Russ, let's circle back to the other part of your statement, which is people donating things to feel good about themselves. And then they go
Yep.
through and they get palleted and container shipped to different parts of the world, often impoverished
Yep.
countries. And some are sold and some are reused, but a
Yep.
lot of
Don't.
what no one wants then finds its way to a part of the world where the country that is getting 100 things that can use 20 of them has to deal with the fallout of the 80% of the
Yep.
trash in
Yep.
a economic and structural environment that is the least capable of dealing with it,
Yep.
which is why you see those piles of trash and things
Yep.
floating in oceans. And
Yeah.
that to me is something that needs to get addressed.
It does. We even had that in LA with when we had the fires here a year ago. Too many clothes were donated. And so you would have individuals, you'd have nonprofits, so just sending all these clothes thinking it's needed. And at the end of the day, it was just too much inventory for the demand. And so it can even happen in a first world country. And where did those clothes go? I don't know, but there's a good chance they ended up somewhere even worse. So yeah, it's absolutely, if you're whatever you're doing with product at any point, you have to do it responsibly. It's not enough to just do something because it feels good. You actually have to pay attention to the outcomes that you're trying to achieve.
That's right.
Yeah. So I was listening to one of your podcasts. You talked about financial plumbing. Um, that in a lot of times in a somebody rolling out a buyback program, they just don't have the plumbing to do a buyback or to do a trade in. So where does that come? If I'm trying to pilot this program, I guess that's something you're just gonna it's gonna different at each organization. I was gonna say like where does that come in the process? But I
No,
think
no, it's actually a good question. So when you go through, most of your point of sale systems are engineered to sell things out.
yeah,
And most of your procurement for things that are being sold takes place way up the food chain. Where if you're a distributor, you're buying from a brand and there's a purchase order, there's a sales forecast, there's a delivery cycle, there's terms. We'll pay you in 30 days, we'll pay you in 90 days, we'll pay you in 120 days. Use this system. Um, so you acquire things upstream. From a circular standpoint, you're not buying from a brand or a distributor through a purchase order, you're buying from the end customer.
right.
The new car dealership will go through and put in a forecast for I need these many cars, I need these many trucks, I need these features. They'll know that those cars are going to arrive on a truck on this date at this time.
Yep.
And they'll put them on the lot and they'll coordinate sales around them. Your used car leader doesn't know what's going to drive on their lot, doesn't know when
Yep.
it's going to drive on the lot, doesn't know what condition it's going to drive on the lot in, but they've got to be capable of going through, buying at this price to sell at that price, and they're giving the customer the value for it.
Yep.
So, like when I started the trade-in program, what they wanted to do is they wanted the customer to go through, pay for the whole thing, and send off their thing and get a rebate check back or something from the owner.
Hate rebate checks.
Yeah, like and most people do too.
Yeah.
And when I was going through with the Knights Who Say No, when I got to Dr. No, and I was trying to figure out how can you go through and give someone value? Why don't we just discount it? Because we're going to get paid for it back. Well, discounts were bad financial metrics that the street looked at. No, you can't discount. What if we put a bill credit on? And then we'll go through and apply the amount of the trade to their bill. We're going to get paid for it. It'll net even. It's kind of what they're doing right now anyway.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that. So I had to go through and I engineered a way to go through and buy gift cards from my supplier. So our reps would go through in the proof of concept, put in the device, the gift card would get issued, and we would apply a gift card towards the transaction. That's how I broke circular finance. There were some bad things that happened after that where people took advantage of the loophole, but that's how I initially breached the point of sale finance when the IT team and finance team said, well, we don't want to invest in infrastructure until we know that this thing is going to work.
Right.
And I had to prove out what I thought it was going to be. And once the proof of concept worked, I remember when I presented the results to the CEO of the company, he's like, let's roll it out. I'm like, hold on, we need some infrastructure to make this work. There's some holes in the process that could be exploited. So, well, you've already built a process that works. So why would we invest in fixing it? And that took 2 years to go through and do the integration. But finance and accounting for different companies is different.
Yeah.
Breaking circular point of sale, breaking circular accounting, breaking circular um, sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Those are all things that I've learned over time that have to be addressed.
But just that insight into discounts are not the way to go. You have to be thinking at that level when you're trying to roll out this program. That was a gold nugget, I thought.
I spent half my life in sales, and the old adage was when in doubt, discount.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk tariffs. Um, how are you thinking about circular logistics and tariffs? Is it a hedge that you can use to kind of fight those? Or is our tariffs, increasing, decreasing the opportunity to do buybacks and sales? Are people holding onto their devices longer?
Yeah, I went to the DHL Innovation Summit in Austin, and they were talking about how technology is being used to address major problems. And the one thing that people talked about the most as a major problem was duties and tariffs. And duties and
Hmm.
tariffs are different things. I
Yep.
won't bore you
Yep.
with the difference, but it's complicated. It's complicated to go through and say, well, how do you assess the value of something that is used from a duty and tariff perspective? Kelly Blue Book, you can go through and say it's worth this. When something is new, there's a lot of companies that don't know how to go through, and there's not a whole lot of government regulation on how much do you depreciate for something over time off
Sure.
the new by cost. So applying the value of it, kind of similar to that. Here's your paper from Goodwill.
Yeah.
That's tough to get through, and it's dangerous if you miss. And then you get the old economics of supply and demand. If you did Econ 101 and you have an MBA, the higher the price,
Hmm.
the lower the demand, the greater
Yep.
the demand, the higher the price. So whenever you have an environment where things are more expensive, reusing used things becomes more attractive. Um, Supply and demand, the greater the price, the lower the demand, and the greater the
Yep.
threat of new entrants into the market. Or what I found with mobility is there's different ways that people will leverage their equipment to pay for the next new thing. So it's a transition of how it's going. Point being, I believe that I call it an unintended benefit because I don't think that the administration was necessarily going for this, but I think that this is what happened from a sustainability standpoint is when duties and tariffs started going through and impacting the price, keeping things longer in circulation or going through and buying something used became more attractive. We saw that with COVID when the supply chain broke. Um, Used things were sometimes more expensive than new things because you couldn't get new things.
Yep.
So I'm kind of bullish that urban mining, if China goes through and shuts down precious metal extracting, finding those things from things that have been discarded here,
Yeah.
there's going to be creative ways to make the cost to reuse more attractive as it goes through. But in my mind, I like to look at the glasses half full, where tariffs just make reusing more attractive.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Well, thanks so much for your time. I want to wrap up here in the next few minutes, but maybe in closing, what's one assumption that you wish business leaders would retire in 2026 about circularity and
Oh,
and
cool.
and how would they replace it?
So I like to do on my podcast a myth bust, where
Okay.
we go through and we do something very similar. We ask the same question: what is something you hear over and over again that you just think is not grounded in reality?
Yep.
And one of my favorite ones is the myth that people don't want used things. Um, Now, what I found right now is I'm going through and I'm selling in the major brands
Hmm.
with people that have my amount of gray hair or more that got to their level by being great at selling to the first customer.
Hmm.
And, Gen X, um, baby boomers, they've got a lower propensity to buy things used than new. We grew up where used things were stigmas. So when I started going through and talking to leaders about buying things back, I heard it just this morning that
Interesting.
that hey, we shouldn't sell this stuff in the open market because it's new, and ITADs are good at selling things that are used, not new. That's not true. overstocks, overproduction, stock rotations are things that have happened for the longest period of time.
Yep.
My 2015 Dodge Ram that I'm driving, I do need to get a new truck only because my son turned 16. But if I traded in my truck, my 2015 Dodge Ram is not a threat to the 2025.
Right.
But the reason why they're offering me $25,000 for my used truck instead of the 75,000 that they're trying to sell me on the new one is because they're going to sell it for 30 and they're going to sell warranty and services.
Yep.
So when business leaders are applying what they know about how they got into their position of success by selling to customer one, they've got a perception that customer 2, 3, and 4 needs the new thing the new way. And that's not the case at all. The secondary market is really good at matching used supply with used demand.
Yep.
And your marketplaces like Amazon, eBay, they're all incentivized to provide a good customer experience or people won't shop there. So the marketplaces are self-regulating, and the fear of cannibalization, the thought that customers don't want used things is so old school.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not you, it's a different customer. And you're blind to an opportunity if you don't see the second and third customers.
Now, the final thing I'll leave with is when I started the trading program and Dr. knows like you need to focus on selling accessories, not this crazy buyback scheme. By the time I left Verizon, the revenue off of things that people no longer wanted was greater than the revenue of selling every accessory in every sales channel we had combined.
Wow. That's huge. That's huge. Uh, well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Where can people find you? Where can they find your book? Any URLs you want to direct people to?
Yeah, LinkedIn is my love language. You can find me, Rich
Okay.
Bulger, there. We've got a great website, www.allthingscircular.com. Links to the book are there, links to the podcast. I found that this is an undereducated part of the industry. So we teach master classes that we've done now in 6 different countries. We've done 15 different events. So you can look up myself, and I'm the least impressive part of my team. You got Dr. Peter Evans, who's got a PhD from MIT, Vic D'Arcy, who ran Cisco's refresh program, Damian Pollock, who's one of our key podcast producer extraordinaires, but our wholesale market lead. You can find out everything about all of us at allthingscircular.com.
Okay. Well, great. So you guys heard allthingscircular.com. Go check it out. Join a masterclass. Pick up his book. There's lots of great content in there. So thank you so much, Rich. Appreciate your time.
Russ, thanks for having me.